Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So we're continuing on with our series on women's financial empowerment today. And my guest is Nikki Tucker. And Nikki is a speaker and founder of the FIIRM Approach. She's known as a problem solver since her experience and her time involves helping female breadwinners strategically exit their marriage and work on their new financial life post-divorce. So this one is for all of you breadwinners who write to me and say, you know, I'm not the financially disempowered spouse. I am the more moneyed spouse or the breadwinner. What do I do? How do I deal with this? And so this episode is for you. And just a quick reminder that if you like this episode, please feel free to share it. And if you like the podcast, I would love for you to give me a favorable review on whatever platform it is that you are listening on today. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Nikki Tucker. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the show. I am so happy to have this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. I am very happy to be here.
Yay. It's a win-win. We're going to talk today about being the high income earner. This is a conversation I haven't really had on my show. And I have a lot of women who are the high income earners, whether they started out that way or not, and are now facing divorce or going through divorce. And it's kind of a different story for them. Can you sort of walk us through a little bit about why that's a little bit different for them and the things that they might have to be thinking about that other people may not?
I think one of the things that women, I'm generalizing a bit, but are getting used to the idea is that when it comes to divorce in particular, sometimes the playing field is a little more level in some ways than in others. And one of those ways has to do with support. And so when you think about support payments, whether it's spousal support or child support, your high income earner very often is the one who may be providing some form of support payment. And I've literally had women say to me, women have to pay support? And I'm like, yeah, it's 2024.
Yeah. Listen, we're rolling back all of our rights, but we still, but this one, we still have.
Yeah, this
right.
one is where the playing field is level. And they're saying, regardless of gender, a woman can pay support. And so I do think that genuinely catches some of us by surprise. And it still surprises me when I hear that question. But also the preparation of what that looks like how is support calculated especially when you're thinking about the state to state differentials. And oftentimes high income earners hang out and roll with other high income earners. Okay. So, you know, if you think about your lawyers, your doctors, et cetera, your professionals that earn a very decent living, and sometimes they have conversations with their peers and they start comparing and contrasting and trying to project how their divorce is going to go based off of someone else's experience.
Yes.
And so I have to warn clients that just because your income may be similar or your profession may be similar does not mean that your divorce experience will be the same. Okay. And that's another thing that I think that often women are not prepared for. I see you nodding your head. So I'm going to say.
I am nodding my head because I say this all the time. Say, first of all, don't take divorce advice from anyone who's not a divorce professional. And certainly don't base what you think is going to happen in your divorce based on someone else's divorce. It's all different. I don't care if you make the same amount of money, like you said, the same profession. All divorces are different. They just are.
Right.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that. Those are some surprises, right? Oh, women have to pay support, right? Because it used to be only men had to pay support, but that's because they were the only ones who were making money.
Right.
We got the right to work, so we won the right to pay support. What do you say to women who are the higher income earner, but whose spouses are possibly deliberately under earning? They're the stay-at-home dad who plays video games all day. This is not a level playing field. This is where things are not.
It's not a level playing field. And unfortunately, my guidance in general is if the marriage is not working, it is generally better to end it sooner rather than later. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so in those situations, whether it's intentional that the non-moneyed or less money partner is not seeking to bring in a significant contribution financially to the family or not, whether it's intentional or not, it is likely going to hurt you. And when I say hurt you, it's not that I don't view marriage as a partnership, because I do. But I think the laws are a bit archaic in some ways in how things are calculated. And so I feel like women are not prepared for the reality of what that looks like when the income disparity is so high. So if you're in a situation like that and you know, or you're considering and you're thinking this is not going to last, don't wait. Make a decision, take action sooner rather than later, and begin to make a plan. So even though I feel like, or I know that higher income earners have more things to worry about because they tend to have more assets. They tend to have a higher level of complexity if you get into stock compensation, stock equity, or phantom stock, all these different things that maybe you have in your life that your partner doesn't and maybe have no clue about, quite honestly. All of those things will come into your divorce negotiations, your divorce discussions, and you need to be prepared for that and understanding what you're up against and what your partner is entitled to, again, based on the state that you live in or the prenup that maybe hopefully you have, but possibly don't.
Let's talk about prenups. Probably too late for most of the people listening to this podcast for the first time around, but for the next time around and for your children, what is the importance of a prenup?
They're really important. And I'm just going to, before I dive into that, I want to say something that you said was really important, right? It may be too late or it may not be. Postnups are a thing, right? They're not super common and it's not as if everyone's rolling out the red carpet for a prenup or a postnup, but postnups are possible. They're just a little trickier because you're going into the agreement after the nuptials, of course, and trying to land in a happy medium. So I do want to just call that out. And I've had consultations with a few women that just based on their unique circumstances, a postnup sounds like a fantastic idea, right? But it's not for everyone, and I recognize that. That being said, I do think that prenups are the next best thing for high income earners in particular, when there is a disparity between what someone's earning in the relationship. And if you're going into a second marriage, it's even more important. And the reason that I say that is because oftentimes people think about prenups as being one-sided. They're intended to serve both of you. So they have to be fair in order to even be legitimate in the first place. And so it cannot cause some level of undue harm or hardship to the other partner anyway. And I think that people forget about, I won't even say forget, are unaware that that is a requirement.
Most people think prenup and they think basically I'm signing a document that says I'll get nothing if we divorce. And that is not actually legal.
No.
Right. It's not.
It's not.
Right. And so for people who don't know, so first of all, what a prenup might say. Also, I want to talk about a postnup and sort of for people who don't know, like how that actually works. What should a prenup look like?
So a prenup is a legal document that allows for you to stipulate the direction and the management of money and finances in your marriage, ultimately. One of the best things that I think that it does is indicates the intention for property. So when you are coming into a relationship with property, what's called separate property, but it's property that you or assets that you have prior to entering into your marriage, and in many cases, debt that you
Mm.
have prior into entering into your marriage, then you have an opportunity, one, to have conversations with your partners. So prenups come with communication and transparency
Yes.
about what your financial position is. And
Mm-hmm.
then those conversations end up in a legal binding document that says, for example, I own a home and I'm actually a widow, but I'm a widow. I have a 19-year-old son. I own a home. If I am entering into a marriage with someone, it's really important to me because I've owned this asset, this home, prior to meeting this person, prior to marrying this person.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to me that my son gets this home or a significant portion of this home or the value of this home.
Mm-hmm.
And so the prenup, as an example, would allow me to dictate that and spell that out. Conversely, if my future husband had a home and had children, I would hope that he would want to do the same thing to protect the
Right.
interest of his children. So you can stipulate what you want to do with assets. You can stipulate what you want to do with debts and liabilities, but also the management of certain things. Like if you're going to have joint accounts, if you're going to have a combination of joint and separate, you can stipulate and get into details about titling. If something is titled in one person's name, what does that really mean? What's the intention? Because without a prenup, then again, your state law basically dictates what that means. So you have a prenup, whether you know it or not. It's just one that you design or one that your government, local government design. You can just decide which one you like.
I love that. I love the idea that you actually have a prenup. That it just you get to say you can either design it or have it be designed for you. And I guess also what I'm hearing is that, and this is I think something that's really important for people who are, maybe getting remarried or is that the prenup isn't just all about what happens when we divorce. It's also what happens while we're married, which
Yep,
is most people
exactly.
I think don't think about it in that way, which I think is
It can
important.
It is important. And I think it can be seen as the thing that almost protects your marriage in a sense. And I know some people are going to be
100%.
shocked by just the idea of it, but it protects your marriage because it allows you to be on the same page. So again, high income
That's right.
earner, maybe your financial philosophy, the way that you approach money, the values that you have, the behaviors, and all of those things associated with how you manage your money could be different from someone else who, just from a common sense perspective, is not used to managing that same level of income because they haven't earned it. That doesn't
That's
make
right.
them a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad person because you're earning money, but it does mean that there's a higher likelihood that you don't have the same concerns, you don't have the same struggles, conversations because you just haven't had to, right? And
Right.
and that's
Sure.
okay. Yeah, so I think with again, the prenup giving you an opportunity to say, this is how we're going to approach things. Even if we have different experiences, different perspectives, and different incomes, here's the happy compromise. Again, here's our intention on how we would like things to be in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
but it's not intended to be punitive, and so many people view it that way.
They really do. They really do. And I think it's a really important distinction. We're going to take a quick break. And on the other side, I want to talk about postnups. So we will be right back. Okay, we are back. So just before the break, I said we were talking about prenups and I want to talk about postnups. So you're married. Maybe your financial picture is changing. Maybe things are happening that you're getting alarmed. Maybe you're starting to feel like, ooh, we gotta like work some things out. This is when a postnup would be perhaps in order? Like, well, how do you know?
Yes.
When do you know you want a postnup?
What are the triggers for a postnup?
What are the signs?
So I'll tell you two common or traditional triggers, and then one maybe not so common, but in the current world, it probably will be more common. So one, I would say business owners, someone who owns a business, maybe even starts a business or something during the marriage, but there's one person that's doing the majority of the work and it's separate and distinct. This is not like a partnership. You're not running the business together. And you make a decision that to protect the earnings of the business and interests, maybe you have outside partners, other things like that, that you want to have a document that again demonstrates what are the intentions around the earnings of this, who is the actual owner, etc. So you come to an agreement on what that might look like. Another thing is inheritance. So someone gets a significant amount of money that, like you said, in the beginning of the relationship wasn't there, and they may not want it to be considered a marital asset, joint asset. Now, tricky still because you're coming into it after the fact. And you need to have that conversation with your partner and, figure out all of the legalities, which you would do with your attorney. But those are the common things that I generally see someone even being interested in a postnup.
Even though inheritance is usually not considered marital property, you still want to have that conversation, because if maybe there are funds that are commingled. Maybe I decide that I'm going to I'm going to renovate the bathroom, but then the money is commingled, right? So those are the kinds of
that's
things.
exactly why. Yes, that's exactly why, the commingling piece. And again, it gets to be a little confusing because it's like, oh, well, we use that to go on this big family vacation, or we did something that benefits the marital asset or home in general. So,
Okay.
It's one of those things.
Okay. And so one more reason for a postnup.
So this is a little less traditional, but today people are open to other ideas that are not the traditional binary view of a marriage. And so whether that means bringing in other partners or again, just changing up what has been going on in a marriage for 15 or 20 years. And now you want to change something to be completely different. And it makes people feel a little bit insecure and concerned about like, what is our new marriage going to look like? And how do I protect myself, my interests? Again, I want to make sure we're on the same page as it relates to the finances. I've seen people have conversations about postnups because of, we'll call it changing the dynamics of a traditional marriage to something that's less traditional.
Sure. So let's say they open up the marriage, or someone's like, I'm poly, and the partner is like, okay, let's explore that. Then you're dealing. So the postnup would address spending marital funds on other people, right? I'm going to go take my girlfriend on a really nice date tonight, but I'm going to be using marital funds. Are we okay with that? How does that? I see. Interesting. Okay. And then would a postnup also cover sort of non-financial issues around that? Like, do people have pre and postnups about maybe polyamory or the one thing I know about the poly community is that there's so much communication and consent, and it's like amazing. I wish I was poly. because that seems to be where people are like actually being honest about the relationships they're in.
And to a certain extent, I think it can. I think it's just a very gray area and a newer area. So it's about enforceability, right? So it just depends.
Sure, right. This is a legally binding document. So we're not saying, right. And also you're the financial person, so I don't need to be asking you about
that's
so
okay.
how do you mitigate? How are you mediating your poly relationship? I don't know. Ask somebody else. Okay.
It's a fair question, though.
I mean, I think like having a kid might be a really good time to maybe have a postnup, right? It's like, okay, we have a kid. We've decided together that you're going to stay home. Maybe we need to clearly define what that looks like. And then also what are the financial, because I would look, if I were doing this again, which I'm not, but if I were, because like you, I have a 19-year-old, I am not resetting that clock, nor am I biologically able to. But if I were, and I was going to have a baby and stay home, I would actually like to have a postnup that says I'm getting this much for a retirement account. I'm right, because if I'm opting out and I'm not working outside of the home, there are benefits that I'm giving up that are more than just a paycheck.
Absolutely. And your prenup and your postnup can do both. So
Yes.
it can make provisions for that person that decides to be the stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad.
Right.
And even if you don't have kids, a stay-at-home wife or stay-at-home husband, like you can make provisions in the document that speaks to the contributions that someone is bringing to the marriage that may not be viewed on the surface as monetary contributions, but they're valuable contributions. And so that person still has security and understanding, even though I'm not bringing in income, I'm going to be protected, right? I will have access to assets and income in the future. And it could be formulaic, right? Where you're deciding on what's a reasonable formula based on a number of different factors, how long you've been married, how many kids you have, income, percentages, all of those different things. But it's absolutely possible. Conversations like this, and I'm so glad we're having it, needs to happen more often because we put a lot of emphasis on the emotional, relational side of marriage.
Yeah.
And that's great. I love like the next person. However, there is an equally important, and in divorce, pretty much the only thing that matters is the business side and the transactional side of the relationship. So you're going to tackle it one way or the other at some point.
100%. I so agree with you. And what I was going to say was, why are we not having more of these conversations? So we're on the same page, right? I think these are the most important conversations that we're not having. Right. And I think it goes to the way that we prioritize love over the importance of, we are entering into a business arrangement. This is a legally binding business arrangement that we're entering into, and we're not talking about it from that perspective. We shouldn't be allowed to. Listen, if in certain states you have to wait a year, but you have to be separated for a year before you can file for divorce, which I think is a good thing from the perspective of letting emotions cool down and everything. I think that's great. But maybe we should force people to wait a year after being engaged before they're allowed to get married.
I agree with you. And this is going to maybe sound weird to some, but we'll call it the barrier of entry to marriage.
That's right.
The bar is too low. It's way too low. And
it is way too low. I agree.
We spend a lot of time on, we need to go into premarital counseling as an example. That's not a bad thing. It, again, allows for transparency and communication. But premarital counseling, in my opinion, should have a requirement associated by your state, if necessary, of the financial aspect. So when you're going through a divorce, you have to complete a financial affidavit or financial disclosure or whatever it's called in your state. When you're going through the prenup process, you have to, again, disclose all of your assets, all of your liabilities. Why don't you just have to do it when you're getting married regardless? It doesn't matter whether you're signing a prenup. It doesn't matter that maybe your marriage is going to end. Why isn't there more encouragement and support for having an understanding of what you're walking into? And I think to your question about why isn't it talked about more, one, there's some people that view it as a jinx. And, there's some stigma around having certain conversations. Definitely a stigma around having a prenup. But also there's a fear. If we get down into the details and the nitty gritty, maybe we'll find out that we're not as compatible as we thought we were. And people are not embracing the idea. Yeah, you don't want to embrace that idea. You're like, no, we'll let sleeping dogs lie and we won't touch it until we have to, as opposed to, if you uncover that you're not as financially compatible as you thought you were, then you can learn how to be financially compatible. It's about communication, it's about transparency and compromise. That doesn't mean your relationship is over.
But if you think that those sleeping dogs are going to stay asleep for like the rest of your life, I have some bad news, right? Because that's why Nikki and I are in business. Because they don't. Right? I always say, like, I would be thrilled to be put out of business. I would be thrilled for people to be in healthy, happy, loving relationships, like till death do us part. But that's just not the reality. And I think in answer to your question, why don't people have to go through this mandatory disclosures and all of those things through the court system? Well, they wouldn't make as much money off of our divorces, Nikki.
I know.
Like most things in our capitalist society, they're just making money off of it. Premarital counseling is not like there's not like a cookie cutter way that we do this. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter, but you can go to any therapist and be like, we want to do some premarital counseling. And they'll be like, okay, what do you want to talk about? Look, I did premarital counseling, quote, before I got married. And it was one session with the priest who married us, who was like, so are you guys happy together? I mean, I don't even remember what he asked us, and it was one session. That's not premarital counseling.
Oh,
I have a friend who did years worth, almost, I think a full year of premarital counseling. And I'm going to talk about that on the other side of our break. We'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. And I said that before the break that I wanted to tell you about my friend who went through over a year's worth of premarital counseling. It was intense. It was so intense. And it was, he had a history of drug addiction. And so it was like, how are we going to be if he relapses? What is the plan? Right. And it went into really, really, really deep stuff. And I felt like they were so prepared for marriage, better prepared for marriage than anyone I think I had ever met. Unfortunately, he did relapse. And the way that they agreed they were going to be when he relapsed didn't come to fruition, because, of course, that would require him to actually not be on drugs. So I don't have an update on that recently, but I was so impressed with what they went through and how many intentional conversations they had to have that I want that for everybody.
I would love to just shout from the mountaintops about what you just said, because I don't think that there's anyone that I've ever met in the divorce space that wants someone's marriage to end. We want people to have a long, sustainable, happy, fulfilling marriage. And so what comes with that is generally a lot of work on the front end to understand, like you said, some of the things you might be up against, and you can't prepare for everything. But there's something to be said for someone spending that amount of time. A year is a long time to have intentional conversations about how your marriage is going to go and the things that you need to prepare for. I just think that more people should do it. That's all. Self included. Like, if I were to get married again, baby, we're digging deep.
That's right. That's right. And like the idea that people wouldn't want to, it's like, listen, if you say to your partner, listen, I want to do this work before they get married, and they don't want to do it, that is a red flag. Right. That is a red flag. If they don't want to do the work before the marriage, they're not going to want to do it during the marriage. So heed that warning. So the high income earner, the moneyed spouse, as a woman, because we really, as you pointed out by saying that people were surprised that women would even have to pay support, most of the structures that are set up around marriage and divorce do not necessarily support the any of a woman being the high income earner from a mindset perspective, or right. And so are there any considerations that a female high income earner may have or need to think about that maybe a man doesn't, or maybe is assumed of a man that a woman may not have the same expectations around?
Yeah, well, some of it is from my experiences, on the softer side. That there's an expectation that women should be more reasonable and accommodating because they are the higher income earner, maybe more accommodating than they would expect a man to be. So I feel like the divorce process is often set up to be somewhat adversarial. And because not all the time, but very often the man can be the higher income earner, then it's positioned where he should fight. And when the woman, who, let's say, earns the same amount of income, has a similar position and she wants to fight and be aggressive, not unreasonable, but just be aggressive in the sense of, I want this to be fair. And I also want to make sure that I am protected.
Yeah.
That sentiment is not always welcomed when it's the woman who has that position.
Isn't
so that's
that
what
interesting?
I mean by the softer side of it.
Yes, right. It's like when a man goes in, it's like, I'm going to protect my assets and, it's my money. That's the thing, right? That's the patriarchal thinking around money, is that for men, it's my money. For women, when you're the high income earner, it's not my money. It's
our money.
It's our money, which it is on both accounts. But I think you're right that the divorce process approaches that differently.
Yeah.
And unfairly.
That's the biggest thing that I've seen.
Interesting.
When it comes to, as I mentioned earlier, some of the dynamics and considerations, I find that to be gender neutral in the sense of they're just things that you have to account for as a high income earner because of how your compensation is structured, as an example. From my experience, has been relatively gender neutral. And again, I'm on the financial side, so we're just probably deeper in the numbers.
That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that other piece catches some women by surprise because it's not fair.
Right. And by the way, just to clarify, it is our money. And right. And so actually the way that it's thought about for women might be sort of the more fair, but also you can still protect yourself.
Yeah, that's it. Hard stop. You don't have to be kind I won't say kind, but over accommodating.
That's right.
Just because you're a woman who has a high income, like it unfortunately comes with a societal burden that I think that a lot of men don't have to deal with, as if we should be saying like, well, you have enough. You've made a lot of money. Isn't that enough? Right.
Right.
And,
right.
It's
You're great. Now you're greedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Women are greedy and men are, successful. Okay. In your work, you work as a CDFA. You work with something called the FIIRM Approach. What does that stand for? The FIIRM Approach. The
FIIRM is an acronym. And the FIIRM Approach is actually, I call it a resource company. And the reason I call it it's a financial resource company is because we're connecting women to tools and resources that they need when they're going through the divorce process, or even trying to prevent the divorce process, or when they come out on the other side and they need to start the new chapter, land their feet on the ground, or just regain their footing. And so we provide support and resources and information to women to help them do that. But it's an acronym because, one, I really like acronyms, but two,
cool.
Two, I think it sets the framework for how we not only help women, but how we hope that women will approach their finances. And so that's with being flexible, being intentional, informed, resourceful, and masterful when it comes to making important financial decisions. That doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. No one's expecting you to be perfect, but you're open to the journey, you're open to information, and you just want to learn how to make the best decisions you can with the information you have at the time.
And why is that such a radical concept for women, Nikki?
It's a good question. Well, we
For
know
all the things we've been talking about. Right.
Yeah, we know that money can be emotional for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And very often it's actually easier for humans in general, but women included, to ignore their finances and just say, I'll get to it later, or I don't want to know, or it's too overwhelming and I don't want to figure it out. And a lot of that goes back to societal norms, in that when you think about the traditional view on marriage and the fact that, or the idea that the husband is the provider and maybe the woman takes care of the home and doesn't really have to worry about anything. There's a heavier dependence, or was in the past, on these very traditional gender roles. And in today's world, we know that most of our households are dual income households. So you have women who are female breadwinners, they're out earning men in some situations, but let's not discount the fact that there is still a gender pay gap and there is a gender wealth gap as well. So you have all of these different complexities is intertwined in the financial experience and in money conversations. And then you layer on individual past traumas and experiences. So the things that can be triggering for people when you have conversations about money, the stuff that comes up for them, or you just hear people say on a very basic level, math's not really my strong suit. So I like to read. I'm into science. I'm into history, but I'm not into math. It's all of those things that make women lean away from making important financial decisions and digging deep and just saying, I'll hand this off to someone else if and when I can. And I just don't think that in today's world, that's not the most prudent way for us to manage our money.
No. And I think there's also a lot to be said that the financial sector is so governed, literally and figuratively, by, rich white dudes. And that's the language that they speak. And it's alienating to women, to people of color, right? It's all like this gobbledygook that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to most of us. When actually, if you just dumb it down, or not dumb it down, but if you just translate it into regular speak, it's quite simple. Not simple, but it's a lot simpler than they're making it, right?
It is, and it can be approachable, much more approachable, hence also the FIIRM approach, because it's about allowing someone to have the opportunity to engage with it in a different way, but in a way that makes sense for them. So all of the jargon and the complex formulas and the tax laws, that's not the exciting part for me either.
Lord.
So if you peel back some of that, then it makes it much more approachable and welcoming for people to want to stay on top of things and to want to learn more about their financial security.
You work with women on all from before, during, and after, right? To help them. And so what do you help educate them on money, right? Like how this all works?
I do. I spend the majority of my time educating them on money. And it's the part that, quite honestly, lights me up the most, because that conversation and that level of education is necessary regardless of where you are. It's necessary whether you're partnered or not. It's necessary when you are thinking about getting married or you're thinking about exiting your marriage. So what I do is offer women essentially two opportunities to learn on their own and say, here's something from a digital perspective and tackle it as you will, or work together with me and you have some just-in-time kind of learning tools available to you, but also we're having real conversations about your unique circumstance. And that is where not only do I learn the most about my clients, because it requires a level of transparency, but also where we talk about their progress, we talk about where they feel vulnerable. And then again, if they are going through a major transition like divorce, it's what do you need to know before you get started. What can you expect in the process? And for me, one of the most important things is how can we keep the cost down? So talking about different strategies so that you come out on the other side okay, and you don't feel like you literally spent your life savings trying to be happier. That's how I see it.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Nikki, where can people find you and your FIIRM approach?
Yeah, well, people can find me on our website. So FIIRM has two I's. So it's thefirmapproach.com with two I's. And we have the same handle on Instagram. I'm usually hanging out on Instagram the most. I'm getting better about that every day. And it's a struggle. And Facebook, but those are our handles on both platforms. It's the FIIRM Approach with two I's. And that's where I engage with women. You can sign up for our newsletter. We have a blog, just different resources and tools for women to learn. But I love to just have a conversation. I've had plenty of women to reach out and we talk for 15, 20 minutes. And if we don't work together, that's okay. Maybe you've gotten all you need and it allows you to move to the next journey and you were just stuck on one point. Like, I just genuinely want to help women.
I love that. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. It was really great to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to listen to your perspective. I love your podcast, by the way, but great to listen to your perspective because it's so down to earth and it's real. And I think the real conversations are necessary in order for women to make real progress.
I think so too. I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.